Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this Thursday episode of the Erudition Network, the interactive Black History and Knowledge session. Welcome you to the show tonight. I know tonight is Halloween, and many of you may be out with your children trick-or-treating or enjoying parties. So I'm aware of that, but that does not stop us from meeting our requirement today and appearing on this show tonight and doing this interactive Black History and Knowledge session tonight. I hope that all of you all have had a really great week and are moving into a new month as we close out this year. It's my birthday month. November is my birthday month. November is Thanksgiving. And as we move into the new year or closer to the new year, as God has kept us through this year, I am very grateful. And I hope that you all are getting ready to enjoy or preparing to enjoy a happy holiday season. I want to cover a couple of things tonight, but I'm going to give it a little bit and allow people to get in if people are going to be here tonight, not really stressing over whether they do or whether they don't. I just want to make sure that we're here for you to ask the questions and to talk about some things. We're also getting ready next week. Is election day, thank God, so we can get through this political season. It seems like we're constantly politicking in this country, and it's gotten to a point where I'm tired of it. I really would like it to just be done, to be quite honest with you. Get on to who, and past it. The vitriol and the sectarianism that we experience during political seasons has gotten more and more crazy. It's regressed to earlier periods of American history, in my opinion, and a lot of us have lost our way, where we start to see politics as a religion and not something per se that affects our lives, but that we can make decisions on. So I really, really want us to do better and get past this particular season. It has gotten very, very, very crazy, and I am just done with it. There are a lot of things that can be covered tonight. Last week we had a pretty decent session last week of going over some history and touching on some things. And I love when we get people to join us and everybody's, interactive. Those are great sessions. So I encourage you to go back and watch those sessions that have been played out this year to learn some things and to grow. All right. I think I've beat around the bush enough. I'm going to open this session like I always do with questions because, we don't have anybody on here right now, but I get questions also in my chat. I get questions um, from people online. Um, and so I wanted to touch on one of the questions um, that I saw within um, our timeline. Um, I was trying to bring up the actual question. If I can't do that, I'll just. But it wasn't necessarily sent to us per se. It was more of a question from one of our viewers were asking on their page, and I thought um, it would be a really, really good thing to talk about. Um, Let me see if I can bring his question up. I hate empty air, but you guys have to bear with me. All right, well, it's not going to let me share it. All right. Well, since it's not going to let me share it, um, I will just read it. I always try to give you guys the visual of it, but I'll just read it. Um, the question was: the church denominations start from pride, and his thing was, hear me out. Somebody disagreed or didn't like the way another person was leading and felt it wasn't the right way, and that led to a lot of people commenting. I saw some history comments. um I saw uh people responding to it, but I told them, I would probably definitely address the comment. Hi Tina, good to see you. Thank you for joining me. But I told them I would address the comment because there's a lot of history to that particular comment, um, and specifically in how America um, was established. Yeah, to the part of it, it was predominantly disagreements that led to these different denominations and different ways of religious celebration. But it was mostly disagreement. But we have to remember that these disagreements caused wars in ancient times, and it is arguable that it caused the beheading of the first King Charles in England, um, because of the Puritan mentality of that took over the country, and the idea that the king was not necessarily right or chosen by God. Um, and so it it is important that we talk about those things because we're seeing now, in the as I said, through this political season, we're starting to see people say and do things that are really, really crazy. We had the preacher get up and make the comment that he couldn't understand why the largest Pentecostal um, group in the country um, supported Kamala Harris, and um, kind of went back on them. And then it doesn't make people feel comfortable because when we go back to the history of the church in this country, right? Um, Slaves and things were, and for Black folks, they were not allowed to worship during slavery without their master being present, without being um, tutored or tutelage by a Black preacher who was usually assigned the job by master, right, to make sure that he did not teach anything but what was in the slave Bible. So when we talk about denominations, there is a little bit of a difference in how, I would say, early white Christians handled religion. Um, Here we are in this, today being Halloween. which, you know, has many different origins, but it does have a Christian adaptation. It has a Roman adaptation. All of these different practices that went into making it. So people had different ways of looking at things. So we could use that as an example. But the history of denominations, I think the best way for me to handle this is to talk about blacks first, right? Because it's different. It is profoundly different than any. I saw someone talk about 10, you know, hundreds and all of this and the different things that were decided by the church. That is absolutely true. But in the 18th century, right, African Americans during the Great Awakening, they were given the ability to go and be put into congregations. And there was religious instruction that was used to indoctrinate. Because here's the thing, people felt that there was a, they knew that slavery was a sin. And in order to persuade those who would be abolitionists, who would be against it, they came up with the idea of offering the black people a form of their religion. I say their religion because Africans had already had a spiritual understanding. It was not lost on them what Christianity and Islam was, because those religions had made their way through Africa in earlier centuries, and they were very much aware of it. So the idea that it was given to them by whites is egregiously wrong. And yet we hear that being pushed out through the internet, through many different people, unstudied folks who make this statement. Carter G. Woodson wrote a book called The History of the Negro Church, in which he goes into how the blacks came to understand religion in an American mentality and adjusted themselves to fit into that. What they bought was their religious or spiritual understanding, and brought that into what they were being taught. Now, they also coded in a way that they would portray a certain thing in front of the master and do something different when they met alone. But when you look at people like Richard Allen and Absalom, could never get that name right, Absalom Jones, they founded the Free African Society of Philadelphia, which led to the establishment of the AME Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, in the 1800s. This changed how we look at things, and how Africans approached the way we worshiped, the way we believed. And so it appealed to us. AME Church is one of the first and many churches that allowed Africans to actually come in and be ministers in the church, right? And allowed for free black people to worship without whites controlling them. So this was very, very, very important. And it goes into why denominations are the way they are right now and why we see it now. The disagreement comes because at the same time, the church is money. There's money in that. And there's power in that. And so you also have the African Baptist Church, which is founded in the South, and how they bought blacks in and became one of the largest African American denominations, because the idea of the baptism appealed to the idea of the river worship that many blacks or many Africans allowed into their that they bought from Africa and allowed into their communities. You may hear that a lot due to the fact that we're getting it's Halloween. People, my camera's going to pick up. I apologize if you hear it more than a couple of times, but that probably will happen. But the denomination thing is important in that we have to understand that African Americans don't worship in the same mentality or way. They never could, as many of their white, the other white citizens. And that does not make our worship any better or worse or lesser. It just shows that we bring with us, as I said on someone's show last week, we bring our spirituality. Our African ancestors brought their spirituality with them everywhere that they went. It wasn't just one way. It was their spirituality, right? And so when you look at that part of it, you kind of get an understanding as to why that is different. Why that is different. And that the Black church has no challenger, right? Being the and how it changed the Black community, but also the United States. So our denominations are kind of built off of that. And I hope I answered that as much as I could tonight for you. And if there are any other questions to it, please answer those questions. Jump in, give those questions tonight. It's a long history. A long history. Hey, Mike, good to see you, brother. Thank you for being here. It's a long history, but it's a history that is important, because we can't look at the church just as a European-centric mentality that comes from a millennial of white worship, right? We can't just look at it that way. We have to understand that there are differences and there are issues and things that went on with that, right? Because yes, we have the early church after Jesus and the crucifixion. We have the spread of Christianity through different empires, the Roman Empire, and to different cultures. We have the early church, and we have the disagreements that we can read of even in the Bible. We can see all of those things that happen. But we got to also understand that beyond the Roman Catholic, beyond the Protestant Reformation, right, there are deeper issues that face us, because the African wasn't always given the ability to worship in the same way. There are major differences between the Protestant and the Catholic, right? There are differences in which during the Protestant Reformation and how we look at things. Who should be able to read the Bible? Who should be able to be bishops, preachers, and people or teachers in the church? These are all a part of the differences, right? When Martin Luther did his 95 Theses in 1517, all of these things, when we look at the Reformation of the Calvinists, when we look at the Church of England, when we look at whatever was motivating different people and how that went about, right? None of that until coming into the 18th and 19th century ever really touches African Americans, because we were not allowed, our ancestors being brought over were not allowed to read, and what they were given to read was usually truncated, edited, and manipulated. And there were religious instructions given on how to align African Americans to the church to perpetuate the idea of slavery and oppression. That was not of God. That was not of God any more than the Crusades and the abuses of the early church were of God. But in focusing on those different things, it liberates people from a mentality. And speaking of that, liberation theology in the 20th century is heavily African American. Liberation theology and evangelicalism allows us to understand that God would that all of us be able to make decisions and be free to make the decision on what we choose to do without the corruption or the mitigation of man. So as we come into the 19th and 20th century and understand our fundamental thoughts on denomination, our fundamental thoughts on religion are different than what people used as a control. Let me say that again. They are different than what people used as a control. And though we have theological disagreements, interpretations, and things like that, the one thing that should not be lost for a Christian is that Christ came to set the captive free. That is liberation theology. And we evangelize and go out and teach people that Christ died so that you may be free of sin. Freedom. Freedom is an essential thing that people in bondage understood and wanted to understand. So I hope I did a decent job of explaining that on this evening, but I wanted to touch on that question and provide that question. Now, I said we got a couple people here tonight. We had a couple people in here. If you got any questions, please drop a question. I promise you we will answer it. This is the question portion of the broadcast, where before I kind of get into anything really deeper, I give you room to ask these questions and things that concern you or things that are on your mind. I did get a question earlier, which I get every year. I'm not bad at it, right? But about Halloween, is it a Christian or a pagan holiday? Is it something we should celebrate? Is it something, and on and on and on and on and on. Here's the thing. It has a Celtic origin. The Celtics passed that origin when they were conquered by the Romans. And they had festivals. And they had things commemorating the dead and honoring different things. Sometimes they honored God, sometimes they honored the dead. Whatever it was, the tradition was to choose something to honor. As Christianity spread through, Pope Gregory, I believe it was Pope Gregory, established All Saints Day, also known as, All Hallows Day or Halloween. And it was a day that was supposed to be to honor the martyrs and the saints and the religious folks. Again, it was an issue of honoring something. And the evening before became known as All Hallows Eve or Halloween. And that is what we call it today. And so people, because the church and the priests were separate, as we were talking earlier about the denomination thing. During the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, people trying to understand what this really meant in honoring the dead started to dress up in costumes and do things what they called souling, do things they called guising or disguising or hiding themselves and going door to door and exchanging food and treats and different things like that. That's where that came from. They didn't always dress up as demons. There is evidence in the medieval time that they dressed up as saints of the church and as angels and as biblical religious figures. And they went around and they passed goods and trick-or-treating, as we call it, and they did all of those different things. So all of that had a religious marker to it, but it started in a religion that was not Christian. So when people tell you that it is not Christian, okay, that is the way that it started. But the church took it in and allowed it to be something that they could use to honor saints, angels, and the church. That's what it was. That's what it was. You can go back, check your history, look at it, and that's what it is. Now, over time, as Europeans came over here from their different religious sects and denominations, they brought different understandings of it. They blended it with other cultures. So my point to you is that Halloween is a very culturally exchanged belief. It may have started as one thing, but the idea of it has changed so much. We have indigenous people's beliefs within Halloween. We have church beliefs in Halloween. We have Celtic paganists, if that's what you want to call it, beliefs within Halloween. And then we have the commercialization of it that we've seen over the past 100 years, where they've made it into a commercialized day where we buy candy, we dress in costumes, and it's a whole celebratory night for kids to go out and be spooky and act crazy and do things. That's what it is. That's what it is. So you can celebrate, again, that choice is yours. What you celebrate and what you do and what your purposes are. You can choose tomorrow to say that you're celebrating Phillips Day. And it's the day that my family goes out to IHOP or something every year, right? It's on you and it's your decision and it's your choice. I will not tell you what you should and should not do, but I will give you the history of it and give the best explanation of it that I can so that you are aware of what it is. So I hope I answered that question too in earnestness. Good to see you, Pastor Sarton. Thank you for being here with us tonight. But I always try to give you all these things because when people ask these questions or they send me these questions or I see these questions and I know it has a historical base, I try to give that to you. Tonight, I want to talk about something else. Another thing that came in. My wife was watching something and there was a point made about suffrage and how the suffragists got the vote. Now, it's an important thing during this particular point in time where we are in electoral and electing officials into the government, president and whatever. But let me say this to you. The history of the suffragists, I think I've talked about it many times, is convoluted in some ways because we as African Americans or looking at African American history don't often realize how difficult it was for women to attain the vote, right? The suffragist movement came out of many other movements. There were suffragists who had been abolitionists, temperance movement people who were against alcohol. It had a lot of basis, but here is the issue that always stands out to me. When Elizabeth Cady Stanton started the National Women's Suffrage Association in the late 1800s, after the Civil War, it was all about getting women to vote, and women went out there and marched. However, as we came out of Reconstruction, it became more and more about not so much as the women to vote, more so as white women to vote. We had people who turned on African Americans. It is a famous story of how Ida B. Wells, during the march, one of the major suffragist marches in New York, even though African American women or women had raised money and done things to secure the vote for women, because they saw it as a woman's issue. Because remember, the black men had been given the ability to vote before white women. And when black men were given the right to vote, these suffragists and former abolitionists turned on black people, particularly black men, and went into the media, particularly Elizabeth Cady Stanton and all of these women, Susan B. Anthony and different ones, and they made comments about the savage being able to vote before them. And then they stopped they took the money, but they stopped allowing a lot of Black suffragists to participate in marches, telling them that it would send a mixed message that they didn't want to have sent. And it put the suffragist movement in a disarray. Now, why is that important till today? Because now you have people out here talking about history, and I want to make it very clear to you, saying that, well, women now are angry because of the abortion rights issue and everything else. And that now white women feel the pain of being turned against and this and this and that. And I will tell you that history doesn't support that. History shows us that when we look at Black women suffragists, they faced additional challenges. When we look at the history of voting in this country, even when white women were given the vote, even when the votes were being ratified and the suffragist movement was confirmed throughout the United States, we still went through decades where Black women could not vote. Due to Black codes, due to Jim Crow, due to poll taxes, due to tests. And none of these women who had been suffragists went back out to go fight against that. That is the division of the history that still kind of exists. And if we allow ourselves to believe that just because someone is female, that they won't have, that they're just going to agree, history doesn't support that. It doesn't support that. It also doesn't say that people won't assist or won't vote. But what I want us to understand is, let's not revision the history of the suffragist movement to make ourselves feel good and not see history for what it is. There are facts. There are facts in what we look at and what we see here, right? And people like Alice Paul, who was a suffragist, a radical suffragist, had a racist mentality. So the whole idea, everybody is not on your side, that says they're on your side. Make your decision. Vote what you want to vote. Do what you have the right to do. And understand that if it aligns itself into a group, then so be it. A group of people. But don't believe that history tells you that that's just going to happen, because history doesn't tell us that. That's my point of answering that particular question and going into that particular subject, because we tend to do that. We revision history, and it's not something that I think that we should do. We should be honest with it as much as we possibly can. None of y'all got any other questions tonight? I'm going through my questions because I really, I didn't know how many people would have tonight. So my point was not to do a major lesson tonight, but to give room to you all to be interactive and ask things and present things and say things that may be, weighing on you, something that, you may be wondering about in our history that is not being shared or not being provided out here. Please feel free to do that. And we will definitely go into those questions and thoughts and things. I'm laughing at a picture someone sent me. I had another subject. I'm trying to remember. My wife had said something, and I'm trying to remember it. It's escaping me right now. But I would tell you all this too. As we go into this next week and we go into this day of the presidential election, and we see over the next week or so, because it's not going to be an immediate thing, I don't believe, the way that politics has been working right now, I'd ask everybody keep their head. Don't fall into these radical mentalities, these foolish instigators online on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, um, because that stuff is only going to lead you down a negative and depressing path. Stay positive no matter what the results may be, and know that um, that God has everything within His hands, and that you will be okay. Um, Keep yourself positive, and don't allow yourself to become radicalized. In this world of radicalization, where we're seeing more and more people fall into radical mentalities and radical thoughts, um, even as we see things over in Israel and with the Palestinians, as we see conflicts with Ukraine and Russia, let's not find ourselves falling into a divide over here based on some political notion. I do believe in our checks and balances of our system. I believe that people have bled and died and sweat and paid the price to keep those things um, moving within our country. And the fact that I could sit on here tonight with you on a podcast, or that people could go out and take and get jobs and live as free Black Americans, shows you the power, the forethought that God gave, even if people purposes weren't for that, to allow our country and our laws to be written to allow for changes that further the progress of people, of human beings. And so I want you to stay positive and not lose yourself to rhetoric and foolery. Praise God every day for your ability to be here for your family, your friends, and everyone else. And keep it positive. Keep it positive. I'm trying to think of what path to go down with you all tonight. Nobody said anything. Nobody got any comments, any questions, any thoughts, any concerns. I know sometimes it doesn't seem like this is an interactive podcast because I'm talking and I'm giving you information, but I really, really want you to join in and participate. Ask a question. Give a thought. Something that we can all use to grow together. So I always try to leave that door open for it, especially on nights like this where we got things going on. And I know a lot of people aren't going to be with us per se. I really, really want us to do that. So I guess y'all ain't got nothing. Pat started saying one of those fights that people are just listening. And that's fine. That's fine. I enjoy teaching. I'm sorry. My knee. You know, you start to get older when you move your knee and you go, and don't realize that you're doing it. I had the ability, or the privilege, I should say, to go on Mike and Phil's Man Up Real Talk show last week twice, and I appreciate you, brothers, for allowing me to come on and discuss things with you all. But one of the things that we talked about, and I put out, and I'm going to put it out again since we got this time here, is I want to talk. I've been really focused over the last few weeks on our young people. I've been really, really focused on how we provide um, information, knowledge, and our history to our youth. Because what I have started to see is that we're failing to include our history in our daily life. And if you know anything about me, you know that I have been an advocate of us sharing this history for probably as long as I've had this show, but for many, many years. I just believe that we have to do better about how we teach young people, specifically African Americans, um, about our history. And so, one of the things that I'm doing right now is I am creating a new book. I know, another book. Um, but it was crazy because my initial idea was that I did not want to do, I was working on the second part of my series of books. And I was like, well, I'm into that and I'm doing this, but the God that I serve, the God that I love, told me, no, I want you to do this too. And so I am working right now, hopefully before the end of the month, on a new book, ladies and gentlemen. It's called Who Am I? Please forgive the fact that it doesn't have the question mark at the end of Who Am I, that has been fixed in the newer version. And what this book is a book for our young people, for our young people. It is designed to present them questions of who they are and questions that they could ask their teachers. And when I say teachers, as I said on Mike and Phil's show, um, I see you guys have commented. That means you're a grown up if you're grown up when you get yeah, when you get up. Thanks, man. Sorry. Thanks for doing that doing the dummy again tonight. We are glad. Oh man. Look, here's the thing. I love being on with and doing this. But I will tell you all, my focus is so much on our young people. Um, did you hear about yes, I did. Yes, I did, Pastor Sarton. Um, I will say this. Let me take this off of just for a second. I will say this. There is a book, and I saw that Pastor Razor had put it out there. I have been suggesting for many years now that um, people read religious instruction of the Negro. I've been um, saying this for quite some time because when you go and you look at what he said, what this particular pastor preacher said, it goes in line to the same idea, right, that Coach A. Jones was putting out in his book. It goes to the same idea, Charles Carroll wrote out in his books, and many, many books that have been written that demonstrate to us that there is a difference in how certain parts of the evangelical, if that's what they want to call themselves, contingent, look at the Black church. The Black church stands on its own, and people don't like us to make that term the Black church. But there is a reason why we have to say it that way. Because as I said on those gentlemen's show the other day, the Black experience in this country is just saturated in truth and God. When Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and them said, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last, they echoed the idea of not only being free from segregation and racism, being free from past slavery mentalities, but it was also the idea of Jesus, the liberation theology of setting the captive free that I talked about earlier. Those songs are truthful to us, and it bothers some people where they wrap themselves up with Jesus and the flag as one thing, as one idea. As I used to say when I wrote a paper on it, people would say, well, it's God and country. No, for them, it's the same thing, God and country together. And they feel that God is their country. And they have that mentality, and they have had that mentality. And people need to understand that the Klan itself, they believe that they were warriors for God, that they were Christians, that they were Christians. Black people wrote spirituals. They wrote things to state what they felt God, now that time of Jubilee, that God always was with us. And that scares people. That makes people who are not of the Black church see the Black church as what it is, a threat, the power in it, that even if it's not using that power, they see it as a threat. Slaves used to say, before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave, and I'll go home to my father and be free. They sang that. That's a Black spiritual that was sang by the river. The church is so heavily centered in Black culture, and people are afraid of its power. The Black church did something that other churches said that they would do. They built communities. They taught trades. They taught performance. They taught how to sing, theater. You can go on and on and on and on. And so when I see people angry, ticked off, mad, because they don't understand why any parts of the Black church could want to vote for something that would better life for its people or keep its people out of pain.
Someone was detected at your front door.
It blows my mind. But it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me. And I think I'm going to do a show next week specifically on that subject. They have that in our Pledge of Allegiance. Yeah, to God and our country. We just have to understand and to be a little bit more cognizant of the fact that this is what you get from Western civilization history and religion, and how we've taught it for the better part of 1,000 or more years. We've taught people to look at it this way. We have a Perusian mentality, and even in our education system, right? And this is why I am an advocate, and why, again, I keep telling people we need to teach our kids. We need to teach our kids. We need to teach them about the things that I'm writing in this book. Certain things we don't know. So if we let our kids learn, and then they, in turn, tell us, what do you know about Elam? What do you know about the Indus Valley people? About Carthage? About the Numidians? About the migration to Mesopotamia? About the powerful Ghana, Songhai, Mali? About the Phoenicians who sailed around the coast of Africa and into the seas and into early Britain, and maybe also even over into the Americas? What do you know about Hannibal Barca, Sandita Kia, Mansa Musa? What do they know about it? Do they know that Mansa Musa was one of the richest people in the history of the planet? Do they know what started the wars, the Carthaginian Wars? Do they know that Africans are the ones who learned how to bend metal to shape buildings? That they saved empires in Europe during the Dark Ages? No. And we need to teach this history in a way where they can be more appreciative of who they are, where they come from, and not be afraid to ask these questions of the people who look like them in the Bible. I tell a story how when I was a kid, I would read the Bible, and because of the illustration and the art that was in that Bible, I just assumed everybody in there from a very early age. I assumed, okay, well, Jesus was long haired, blue eyed, European looking. And people say, well, why does that matter? It matters. History matters. The struggle of history matters. If you didn't know what the crucifixion was and how the Romans enacted crucifixion was horrible. Horrible. It was prolonged death, usually relegated to those who had done something awful as a state crime or something horrible against the Roman Republic that was going to be made an example of. But Jesus endured one of the worst death penalties of the time at a period in history, because God could have sent him at any time in history. He could have made his plan to send him at any time. But at that time, that juncture, that now affects even us as a Christian, as a Jew, as a Muslim, if you don't see where your African culture in our history, our world history, you don't know that the Africans went to Europe, went to the Iberian Peninsula, and saved them from themselves, taught them skills for hundreds of years, influenced Europe as it was going through its dark ages, where it had lost all recognition of what it had been and who it had been. It's important that we teach this knowledge. And so as I'm writing this book and I say, who am I? That was the question that I had as a young boy. Who am I? What do I know about who I am? And people say, well, why is that important? I saw a man on TikTok saying history is not important. Just move forward. Tell that to the Rockefellers. Tell it to the Carnegies. Tell it to the Windsors over in England. Tell it to any of these privileged families of billionaires and millionaires and old money and power and privilege. Tell them that it's not important who their ancestors were. Tell them that it doesn't matter. Just keep moving forward so that you can no longer lay claim or stake to who you are or what you are. It's a lie that we tell ourselves and that we're continually telling ourselves. This book I plan to get out before the holiday. I'm fighting to get it out before the holiday because it is needed. And I want to get the other one out before, or was I say holidays, before Thanksgiving, and the other one out before Christmas. I want these books out because I want you to go out, get them, and share them with your family. I want us to use next year, this coming year, as a time where we grow who we are, our knowledge. I hear you, Tony. I'm not rushing it. The good thing about being a historian is that you can know some of these things and put them in a book. And as you will notice in that, I said part one. My wife was like, don't overflood them, right? You tend to want to, but just enough that we can grow. Why do they want us to move forward after they want us to move forward? Yeah, exactly for that reason, Pastor Sarton. You've abused this, let's forget about it. It's going to take me some time, but I'm going to do a book about the ingrained racism and the foundation of the white sanity. Yes, do that. Hey, Auntie, how you doing? I just teaching the young, and the message is also the knowledge to everyone who is not. I agree. And that is one of the things I try to do with Erudition. I want us to understand a lot of people just don't know. It doesn't matter what your background, culture, whatever, you don't know. You may want to know, but you don't know because they didn't teach you. Because we've revisioned and retaught and reformed and shaped things to keep things out. We've created systems to keep things out. You said you didn't know who Master Musa until I got deep into the poetry saying, yeah. There are many, many things in our history that we are just not taught. And there is purposes for it. There are reasons for it. Now, here's the thing. If you go through Western civilization history, you will learn about the Roman Empire, the Roman Republic. You will learn about early Christianity. You will learn about the Middle Ages. But very rarely will they touch, or the Renaissance, will they go and tell you how Africa pushed these eras. There was a reason why you saw issues with the Carthaginians and the Romans. The Carthaginians being African Phoenician and the Romans being European. There are reasons why the Numidians turned on the Carthaginians. And I expressed that in my last book of questions. And I walked you through why that history happened and how the influence of such things were taking over. Because when you take over the knowledge, the information, the advances, everything, and how that happened. And why our history is written the way that it is. Why people will argue with you that Hannibal Barca was not a person of color. This is why there was so much ambiguity, confusion in our history, to keep us confused and lost. So when I say we need a book on who am I, for our young people, for themselves and for their teachers, their parents, their traditional teachers, the folks in their churches, the folks in their communities, and encourage them to ask these questions and then to discuss with them who these people are for the greater knowledge of us as a world entirely. It's important. It's important. I thank you all. I know today is Halloween. I know people were out doing different things. I thank you all for joining me tonight. I'm on every Thursday. I was iffy tonight. I was like, I don't know, should I be on? Should I come on tonight? Because I know a lot of people are going to be out doing different things. But I have committed myself to teaching and making sure that we do what we you say. It's good, man. It's good. So you want to pre-order 5 books? We will. I will get with you on that. Yeah, we are going to push knowledge out here. We got to learn. And you know, the thing about it is when you start to see yourself, your ancestors, your people, your culture, folks that look like you, not picking up a book and everybody looks the same hue or same color, and you see the interconnected world that really was there, that once existed, beyond the racism and bigotry and hatred and vile murder that we have seen in latter days, you start to understand that what Jesus said, love one another. Love one another. It's a great commandment. It's a great commandment that many people have violated. He didn't tell them to go down, do the Crusades, and go murder people in the Middle East. He didn't say to throw off and create and write the Essential del Negro and remove Blacks and Africans out of Europe. He didn't say to put people in slavery. But in the name of the church, men wrote and did things. Men, I specify. And so my other book that I'm writing about the Middle Ages expresses that. How men took this universal understanding of where we come from out of Africa and migration and corrupted it and turned people against each other. It's a heavy thing to do. And I thank God for the patience and the understanding to do it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I do too, I start. And that's why I'm writing these books. Hopefully that we can grow the message. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. I'm going to get on out of here. But I want to say thank you to everyone who supports the Erudition Network. Please do us a favor. Share this broadcast. Share. Join us again next week. As I'm, God willing, I'll be back on next Thursday. Join my wife, Tina, on Monday. She will be on at, I think it's 8 o'clock Chicago time, 7 o'clock Mountain time here in Colorado. She's on talking about mental health and trying to get you to live a more adroit and healthy life. Join her every Monday, and then meet me again here, God willing, next Thursday, and we will go into another lesson. I think next week we are going to cover some of the issues, because we know we'll come out of this election, but we will cover some of the issues of the Black churches issue and get into some church history too. I want us to start doing church history episodes at least once a month. That's something that I said I wanted to do, to get into the history of the African American church, of the church as a whole, so that we can better align ourselves. And I may have guests and different ones come on as we express where the church is and how that is, so we can get a better understanding of what that body is and what it has historically done, and not what you just see on TikTok, YouTube, and everything else. All right, I'm gonna get out of here. I've said more than enough. You all be blessed. Until next week, see you then. Thank you for your time. Thank you.